Hi you guys, this is Monarchy here, and today we're going to talk about the economy of NGS due to, like I said, previous videos that I might talk about how people is doing the abusing the imbalance of the market system due to scammers, scalpers, so on and so forth. And I kind of got the green light to talk about a little bit more on the third party besides the company. And so before we keep going on, this is going to be a pretty long video due to it's going to be in parts. So I'm going to let you guys listen to what I have prepared for you guys, because this person sounds more knowledgeable of the economy base, and I'm going to compare it to NGS. How the system in NGS is not good, and due to other things besides that. So this video, what I have, is taking 30 minutes, but I can do it in parts so it won't feel as long, but it's going to be long videos. So just preparing for you guys. So take a listen.
The economy works like a simple machine, but many people don't understand it, or they don't agree on how it works, and this has led to a lot of needless economic suffering. I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share my simple but practical economic template. Though it's unconventional, it has helped me to anticipate and to sidestep the global financial crisis, and it has worked well for me for over 30 years. Let's begin. Though the economy might seem complex, it works in a simple, mechanical way. It's made up of a few simple parts and a lot of simple transactions that are repeated over and over again a zillion times. These transactions are above all else driven by human nature, and they create three main forces that drive the economy. Number one, productivity growth. Number two, the short-term debt cycle. And number three, the long-term debt cycle. We'll look at these three forces and how laying them on top of each other creates a good template for tracking economic movements and figuring out what's happening now. Let's start with the simplest part of the economy, transactions. An economy is simply the sum of the transactions that make it up, and a transaction is a very simple thing. You make transactions all the time. Every time you buy something, you create a transaction. Each transaction consists of a buyer exchanging money or credit with a seller for goods, services, or financial assets. Credit spends just like money, so adding together the money spent and the amount of credit spent, you can know the total spending. The total amount of spending drives the economy. If you divide the amount spent by the quantity sold, you get the price. And that's it. That's a transaction. It's the building block of the economic machine.
Before he keeps going any further, so the transactions, basically it's like what I said previous, that I gave you guys a glimpse I may have on the other videos due to AC, SG, Meseta, so on and so forth. So as well as items that we have in the personal shop, the ones that we're able to sell, gain profit, and many more things that comes to that cycle of the transactions. So like for an example, weapons, armor, outfits, what's it called? Freaking camos and holograms, consumables, so on and so forth. They're all involved in TDR. with that being said, if people are, the real transaction thing that are they're scared of, everything involves in TDR. Regardless how you want to change it in certain ways, let's try to be biased and be fair. Due to Sega NGS themselves and their team, as well content creators and free-to-play players, whales, so on and so forth. With that, we have to keep in mind as well how people manipulate the personal shop. The system is old, and due to an old system and not very good, there's other systems that is better. Like Sega Headline, the previous one, not the one that we're in right now, but the other ones. I think it was when we had the Crimson Realm. They even said your ideas or something that may not go through, and if it changes the game to some extent, to a certain extent, that they may not do it due to maybe resources and whatever they said. To me, it was just an excuse to cover up their ass and their assets due to other things that involves on doing, because they could have started from day one, but they haven't. And they could have as well split the two IPs, but they treat it as an expansion. So all that involves and tied to certain things and certain rules, like TOS, for an example. That all falls down to the previous game. So the previous game is dragging NGS to the ground because they had their ups and downs in the previous, and slowly they prevail, and it was, a pretty good, decent game. And as of NGS, it just made it kind of a little bit complicated and too they try to do the copy and taste thing with a different flavor, and how they start and how we're in the state of the game as of now with the new mechanics and things like that. It just made it to the point that it gives you a bitter or bland taste in your mouth. So let's go on.
All cycles and all forces in an economy are driven by transactions. So, if we can understand transactions, we can understand the whole economy. A market consists of all the buyers and all the sellers making transactions for the same thing. For example, there is a wheat market, a car market, a stock market, and markets for millions of things. An economy consists of all of the transactions in all of its markets. If you add up the total spending and the total quantity sold in all of the markets, you have everything you need to know to understand the economy. It's just that simple. People, businesses, banks, and governments all engage in transactions the way I just described, exchanging money and credit for goods, services, and financial assets. The biggest buyer and seller is the government, which consists of two important parts: a central government that collects taxes and spends money, and a central bank, which is different from other buyers and sellers because it controls the amount of money and credit in the economy. It does this by influencing interest rates and printing new money. For these reasons, as we'll see, the central bank is an important player in the flow of credit. I want you to pay attention to credit. Credit is the most important part of the economy and probably the least understood. It's the most important part because it's the biggest and most volatile part. Just like buyers and sellers go to the market to make transactions, so do lenders and borrowers. Lenders usually want to make their money into more money, and borrowers usually want to buy something they can't afford, like a house or a car, or they want to invest in something like starting a business. Credit can help both lenders and borrowers get what they want. Borrowers promise to repay the amount they borrow, called principal, plus an additional amount called interest. When interest rates are high, there is less borrowing because it's expensive. When interest rates are low, borrowing increases because it's cheaper. When borrowers promise to repay and lenders believe them, credit is created. Any two people can agree to create credit out of thin air. That seems simple enough, but credit is tricky because it has different names. As soon as credit is created, it immediately turns into debt. Debt is both an asset to the lender and a liability to the borrower. In the future, when the borrower repays the loan plus interest, the asset and the liability disappear and the transaction is settled. So why is credit so important? Because when a borrower receives credit, he is able to increase his spending. And remember, spending drives the economy. This is because one person's spending is another person's income. Think about it. Every dollar you spend, someone else earns. And every dollar you earn, someone else has spent. So when you spend more, someone else earns more. When someone's income rises, it makes lenders more willing to lend him money because now he's more worthy of credit. A credit-worthy borrower has two things: the ability to repay and collateral. Having a lot of income in relation to his debt gives him the ability to repay. In the event that he can't repay, he has valuable assets to use as collateral that can be sold. This makes lenders feel comfortable lending him money. So increased income allows increased borrowing, which allows increased spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, this leads to more increased borrowing, and so on. This self-reinforcing pattern leads to economic growth and is why we have cycles. In a transaction, you have to give something in order to get something, and how much you get depends on how much you produce. Over time, we learn, and that accumulated knowledge raises our living standards. We call this productivity growth. Those who are inventive and hardworking raise their productivity and their living standards faster than those who are complacent and lazy. But that isn't necessarily true over the short run. Productivity matters most in the long run, but credit matters most in the short run. This is because productivity growth doesn't fluctuate much, so it's not a big driver of economic swings. Debt is, because it allows us to consume more than we produce when we acquire it, and it forces us to consume less than we produce when we have to pay it back. Debt swings occur in two big cycles. One takes about 5 to 8 years, and the other takes about 75 to 100 years. While most people feel the swings, they typically don't see them as cycles because they see them too up close, day by day, week by week. In this chapter, we're going to step back and look at these three big forces and how they interact to make up our experiences. As Mick...
Okay, before he goes any further, due to, he's saying credit, money, and also debt and other forces around that. So let's say NGS is type of a bank or a buyer that we're the buyers and they're the there are other people's that buyers and sellers. So that comes with AC, SG, and meseta, so on and so forth. So meseta, it's like a credit. and money will be AC and SG. So depending how we use it and function in the economy in the NGS is pretty much how, as much as we spend, we might get in debt. Not Sega particularly, or the player market itself, because player market is pretty much, we could say it's the banker. And yeah, let's scratch that. NGS is the banker. The player market is the banker, and NGS or Sega is the government. So we are the buyers and spenders that everyone profits and not profit at all. So with that going, let's use the top sellers for example. Each and every one, the higher price to the low price, that benefits the banker, so the player shop, but as well as whoever's selling it, they can also go into debt. And even us as buyers, from buying from the player market, from the vendors that it's selling the product. So that's why there is fluctuations and increased prices and decreasing prices. But later on they will explain more how a decrease and increase prices. But in this game, since we're on more than 3 mil, let's say it's up to 3 mil, that can cause a certain fluctuation into the player market. Is it positive? No. It's actually decreasing due to the more value of a certain item and people want to keep adding more. It's slowly making the seller of buyers not to buy it due to, and then also tricking the all that going on. But I'll leave it at that so you guys could think a little bit more and see where this goes. So let's keep on grinding through these conversations.
Swings around the line are not due to how much innovation or hard work there is. They're primarily due to how much credit there is. Let's for a second imagine an economy without credit. In this economy, the only way I can increase my spending is to increase my income, which requires me to be more productive and do more work. Increased productivity is the only way for growth.
Okay, before he goes even further, that income and spending and productivity. So how do we get income? Income is pretty much how we get it from in-game currency itself, meseta. So anybody can make meseta, don't matter how little or how much, but the more you have it, more you're able to spend. So you could continue that cycle. But also depending on the flow of the market. So if someone is, scamming and scalping and so on and so forth, there is so many things that is going on. Like he said, it all goes together. Like there is cogs. How you gonna make an engine start, or how you're gonna make that engine work. There's so many components to make an engine and to make it start and for you could go. somewhere if you're putting that engine to a vehicle or any device. So how can you make it stop and go where you need to go? If someone is messing up that machine, it changes the flow in a certain way. But just to get your gears rolling and going.
Since my spending is another person's income, the economy grows every time I or anyone else is more productive. If we follow the transactions and play this out, we see a progression like the productivity growth line. But because we borrow, we have cycles. This isn't due to any laws or regulations. It's due to human nature and the way that credit works. Think of borrowing as simply a way of pulling spending forward. In order to buy something you can't afford, you need to spend more than you make. To do this, you essentially need to borrow from your future self. In doing so, you create a time in the future that you need to spend less than you make in order to pay it back. It very quickly resembles a cycle. Basically, anytime you borrow, you create a cycle. This is as true for an individual as it is for the economy. This is why understanding credit is so important, because it sets into motion a mechanical, predictable series of events that will happen in the future. This makes credit different from money. Money is what you settle transactions with. When you buy a beer from a bartender with cash, the transaction is settled immediately. But when you buy a beer with credit, it's like starting a bar tab. You're saying you promise to pay in the future. Together, you and the bartender create an asset and a liability. You just created credit out of thin air. It's not until you pay the bar tab later that the asset and the liability disappear, the debt goes away, and the transaction is settled. The reality is that most of what people call money is actually credit. The total amount of credit in the United States is about $50 trillion, and the total amount of money is only about $3 trillion. Remember, in an economy without credit, the only way to increase your spending is to produce more. But in an economy with credit, you can also increase your spending by borrowing. As a result, an economy with credit has more spending and allows incomes to rise faster than productivity over the short run, but not over the long run. Now, don't get me wrong. Credit isn't necessarily something bad that just causes cycles. It's bad when it finances overconsumption that can't be paid back. However, it's good when it efficiently allocates resources and produces income so you can pay back the debt. For example, if you borrow money to buy a big TV, it doesn't generate income for you to pay back the debt. But if you borrow money to, say, buy a tractor, and that tractor lets you harvest more crops and earn more money, then you can pay back your debt and improve your living standards. In an economy with credit, we can follow the transactions and see how credit creates growth. Let me give you an example. Suppose you earn $100,000 a year and have no debt. You are creditworthy enough to borrow $10,000, say on a credit card. So you can spend $110,000 even though you only earn $100,000. Since your spending is another person's income, someone is earning $110,000. The person earning $110,000 with no debt can borrow $11,000, so he can spend $121,000, even though he has only earned $110,000. His spending is another person's income, and by following the transactions, we can begin to see how this process works in a self-reinforcing pattern. But remember,
before he goes on, that's pretty much for whales and primary players. So they have, like he was saying, let's say they have a let's go 10K or a mil. That's the original amount that they have. But if you're able to buy what they're selling, their profit increases regardless of how big it is or how small. They're still gaining some sort of profit. But due to, before I keep going on, due to AC and SG and the scratch tickets, because scratch tickets of AC involves completely to the player market and how much the whales or premium players spend on, like as well as content creators. I can put them there too. They are controlling somewhat of the market system due to if the market, if the AC is just giving out fashion and what else? SG support items, there are certain items that you're able to sell. There is other items you're not able to sell due to Sega's rules that SG and the ones that you're not able to profit, you're not able to make any currency whatsoever. So your transaction stops there. So even Alliance, that someone just said as well, but they just gave me that idea right now. Alliance also takes control of it. So depending on what group or what social statures that you're in, you'll be able to profit one way or another due to whatever people that are scheming and trying to take control of the market, for they could get more profit, and other players just, dig in a ditch and keep trying to climb to the people that haves, because later on he's gonna say there's the haves and have-nots. The ones that playing for free, most of them is going to be in the have-not category. The ones that have so many meseta, more than a mil, they are the haves, or we could say the rich as well. Rich against the poor. That individual split between the two. But Sega doesn't want you to see that. NGS and certain content creators as well. Maybe, I don't know. I'm just putting it out there. There are other things involved. Keep that in mind as we're getting close to more into detail. So let him continue and let him cook.
Borrowing creates cycles, and if the cycle goes up, it eventually needs to come down. This leads us into the short-term debt cycle. As economic activity increases, we see an expansion, the first phase of the short-term debt cycle. Spending continues to increase and prices start to rise. This happens because the increase in spending is fueled by credit, which can be created instantly out of thin air.
AC.
When the amount of spending and incomes grow faster than the production of goods, prices rise. When prices rise, we call this inflation. The central bank doesn't want too much inflation because it causes problems. Seeing prices rise, it raises interest rates. With higher interest rates, fewer people can afford to borrow money, and the cost of existing debts rises. Think about this as the monthly payments on your credit card going up. Because people borrow less and have higher debt repayments, they have less money left over to spend, so spending slows. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes drop, and so on and so forth. When people spend less, prices go down. We call this deflation. Economic activity decreases, and we have a recession. If the recession becomes too severe and inflation is no longer a problem, the central bank will lower interest rates to cause everything to pick up again. With low interest rates, debt repayments are reduced and borrowing and spending pick up, and we see another expansion.
Before he goes any further, okay, if you see these prices, let's go to weapons for an example, or yeah, let's go to weapons. If you could see certain weapons that, depending on the class or what fixa, they're increasing prices. So that's inflation. Deflation, it's when the prices are down and that the prices are cheaper, so people are able to buy and constantly it's more in demand. So when it's a higher price, it's less on the demand due to the price getting higher, less people gonna buy it. Only certain groups are able to buy certain things that is higher price. So anybody can buy lower price stuff because it's in their budget and in their income, and it's easier to get. So once something's easier to get, they're like, okay, this is good, so they have to increase the prices. Like he said, inflation sometimes good, sometimes bad, that they have to decrease, so it will be that other word I forgot. Damn, I was in a roll. But yeah, that's pretty much what it means. When you see these type of prices, that's when certain things are good, certain things are bad. Like premium sword shouldn't be that price 11k. It should be 1 mil, like any other premium sword. Premium sword 1, premium sword 2 should be the same price. But there are people, like, it's higher demand, people are keep using it, so they're increasing prices so they could profit even more, whoever's selling the premium swords. And as well, it's premium armor as well, 2 or 1. So the sword that is like fluid guard, for an example, fluid guard, if it's more in demand when it's cheaper, they're going to increase the price. So they're changing the flow of the flow going up and down depending how people respond into it. And if people catch it right on, they could easily change it and make it as a fair price or a cheap price. But since whales and premium players have more, or any other free-to-play players that plays a lot more, and they're able to get more income more, they'll be able to set their gears quicker than anybody else, as well as getting the supplies and demand what they need from anybody else, so they could stock and getting certain things faster. So that could pretty much point you out to certain people that fluctuate the market system, as well as you're getting closer to find out who is scalping and scamming, third party, as well as the companies. So that could tell you a lot more how people are trying to scam you if they have certain items. So let him continue.
As you can see, the economy works like a machine. In the short-term debt cycle, spending is constrained only by the willingness of lenders and borrowers to provide and receive credit. When credit is easily available, there's an economic expansion. When credit isn't easily available, there's a recession. And note that this cycle is controlled primarily by the central bank. The short-term debt cycle typically lasts 5 to 8 years and happens over and over again for decades. But notice that the bottom and top of each cycle finish with more growth than the previous cycle and with more debt. Why? Because people push it. They have an inclination to borrow and spend more instead of paying back debt. It's human nature. Because of this, over long periods of time, debts rise faster than incomes, creating the long-term debt cycle. Despite people becoming more indebted, lenders even more freely extend credit. Why? Because everyone thinks things are going great. People are just focused on what's been happening lately. And what's been happening lately? Incomes have been rising. Asset values are going up. The stock market roars. It's a boom. It pays to buy goods, services, and financial assets with borrowed money. When people do a lot of that, we call it a bubble. So even though debts have been growing, incomes have been growing nearly as fast to offset them. Let's call the ratio of debt to income the debt burden. So long as incomes continue to rise, the debt burden stays manageable. At the same time, asset values soar. People borrow huge amounts of money to buy assets as investments, causing their prices to rise even higher. People feel wealthy. So even with the accumulation of lots of debt, rising incomes and asset values help borrowers remain creditworthy for a long time. But this obviously cannot continue forever. And it doesn't. Over decades, debt burdens slowly increase, creating larger and larger debt repayments. At some point, debt repayments start growing faster than incomes, forcing people to cut back on their spending. And since one person's spending is another person's income, incomes begin to go down, which makes people less creditworthy, causing borrowing to go down. Debt repayments continue to rise, which makes spending drop even further, and the cycle reverses itself. This is the long-term debt peak. Debt burdens have simply become too big. For the United States, Europe, and much of the rest of the world, this happened in 2008. It happened for the same reason it happened in Japan in 1989 and in the United States back in 1929. Now the economy begins deleveraging. In a deleveraging, people cut spending, incomes fall, credit disappears, asset prices drop, banks get squeezed, the stock market crashes, social tensions rise, and the whole thing starts to feed on itself the other way. As incomes fall and debt repayments rise, borrowers get squeezed. No longer creditworthy, credit dries up, and borrowers can no longer borrow enough money to make their debt repayments. Scrambling to fill this hole, borrowers are forced to sell assets. The rush to sell assets floods the market at the same time as spending falls. This is when the stock market collapses, the real estate market tanks, and banks get into trouble. As asset prices drop, the value of the collateral borrowers can put up drops. This makes borrowers even less creditworthy. People feel poor. Credit rapidly disappears. Less spending, less income, less wealth, less credit, less borrowing, and so on. It's a vicious cycle. This appears similar to a recession, but the difference here is...
Okay. So, how I believe NGS as of now, people are not having that much of meseta, as we have places to gain meseta and increase our wealth. However, depending how you set up your gear and armor, well, yeah, your equipment, excuse me, depending how you set up your equipment and what augments you're using, it can give you a certain amount meseta, regardless where you go to farm. If it's on Stia, Retemp, or Alio, or Kavaris. Either or, wherever you go that you feel comfortable with, you'll be able to gain Meseta. But as in the value on certain items that you're trying to get and get well equipped, it's more harder depending on what focus you have. So let's say someone's focused just completely on fashion. So depending where they're at, if it's in Retemp region, Kavaris, or if they completed the whole game and they're able to travel whatever region that they want, and what is easier for them to get more Meseta, and so they could get profits of the whales and premium players, or they could start getting wealthy. But it also depends on how much they have value. So your credit is Meseta. How many Meseta that they save, how many Meseta that they hoard, what items they able to keep to themselves and hoard for they could have a sustained income for scratching tickets or buying from others or buying from friends, alliance, whatever. It all depends on the player. So, for example, my gear. Well, yeah, my gear. Right now, I'm experimenting with a sword. So, before I talk about more with the sword, all my weapons is pretty much based on seasonal weapons. I haven't touched it to increase the seasonal weapons. I haven't changed the augments. I just run it as is when I first got it. As well, the free weapon when you gain a certain weapon to max cap level. So it would be my gunblade and my rifle. So I was able to, how do you call it, multi-weapon it, and like that I was able to farm and do other contents. But also my armor is from the free thing that happened a year ago with they're giving you that free weapons as well. Once you max cap every class, you get a free weapon and armor, the first one, or they give it for free, I can't remember, but that's what I've been using. I'm using that same armor. I haven't changed it from Octo armor and the newer armor. I'm still using the same shit, and I haven't changed the augments at all whatsoever. I don't have any fixes, as you can see. Maybe just one, or yeah, maybe just that one with the oops, no, the free one gives you a fixa attack 5. My bad. So I only have 2 that has fixa. But out of that, I didn't try to progress my character due to I'm a laid back person. I rather be the turtle than the hare. So the hare is you want to get to the content and finish the game faster, and boom 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 complete everything till you burn yourself out. As for me, a turtle, that I'm chilling and relaxing, doing my own thing, and slowly progress to the story, slowly progress doing certain things, and grinding and whatnot. You know, I'm just chilling. But as of state, if you're gonna farm for Meseta to maybe for per hour to grind and to gain Meseta. For an hour, you pretty much gain, let's see, uh, less than 1K. You can almost get to 1 mil, depending how many hours you put into the game. Every player plays a certain time frame, or depending how busy their schedule is, and you know what they're more focused on. Due to, people will say, if you do this per hour or a week, the last time I heard, you could say you could gain a mil plus more if you play straight NGS, and you'll gain more than 1 mil for, let's say, a weekly base. It's possible, depending how prepared you are and what's your focus. So, for an example, myself, there are times that I am able to play 30 minutes. I won't be able to reach 1 mil in 30 minutes if you're grinding to one thing. If you go log into your account and start playing NGS, 30 minutes, you could only focus certain things, maybe your dailies, and then grind a little bit. Or you just want to get Meseta, that's your only focus. So I'm focusing on different types of majority of people, not just one person. Like, I have a friend that he's free to play as well. I'm like, how many time your time range on playing NGS? He said he has all the time he needs. He could play anytime, whenever, whatever. So he could do what premium players and whales can do, and people that is playing hardcore. I used to play hardcore back when I was a teenager. So I was on that grind, hauling ass, and being with my friends and extending almost like a 24-hour base playing. But as you get older, there's other priorities, right? There are, like, content creators, for an example. There are certain content creators, their priority is content, and probably their life is just involved on YouTube. So their job is the game itself. There are other content creators, they have YouTube and jobs, right? So they have to balance it out, and depending their schedule, they could have more playtime. There are certain ones don't have that much playtime, not even 4 hours, 3 hours tops or less. You have to focus on that, what kind of gear set, what they are. So I'm thinking maybe majority might have the same idea, using event weapons or event armors, and just to pass by. It's like a passing grade in school. Passing grade is a C, maybe a D, depending what you're trying to be in life before you go to college. You need certain credits to get your GPA certain way, right? So this pretty much kind of the same thing, but on Meseta and what you value more, real life or game itself. And a lot of people playing games take it way too seriously, and a lot of people need to chill out and think there's different, like, people would like to say there's different individuals. People have different opinions, different arguments. They could disagree or agree or come into a conclusion, right? Same goes as content creators, same goes as companies. Everyone is different and follow different rules. So, and their social stance, right? And their clicks and whatever. So, like for me, I'm able to keep up pretty much almost anybody that's playing hardcore, but I'm like right behind them with not doing much. You know, if you want to prepare your equipment better, you just need a money pinch, right? So let's say, for an example, you have 5 mil. Take out of the 5 mil, take 2 mil and put it into where is it? Where's that shit? Oh, right here. This thing. You guys probably see the amount of how much I deposit. So I'm not as a poor, but I pretty much save up my meseta. So right now I have like what, 23 mil of meseta. I'm saving for the future because I spend here and there. So if I want to spend to withdraw, I have to draw maybe 1 mil, right? But all that money is gonna go to the future content, because you might see it right now how it is, but it's gonna decrease so quick due to, thankfully, we have the transfer thing that is gonna be around, that we could transfer our augments to another weapon and reroll Fixa, which is fantastic. Only if they were able to change certain things to make it better, to make it easier for new players and players that's coming in, and as well players that's been here, right? Something so simple like let's go to exchange equipment in here. So let's say, do I have anything? Pretty much these things, when you make premium sword 2 and premium armor 2 to this capsule, if it's easy like that to transfer your augments to one armor to another armor, to your weapon that you have to another weapon, how easy that would be, like the fantastic system. But if there's any other loopholes that it makes it more bitchy, so let's say enhancement, you have to have a certain item like grinder and certain materials to get the ball going for you get your meseta thing and then your augments. That'll be more confusing for new players that's just barely coming in, and players that it's coming back in. That would be like, this is too much. You know what? I can stay off this game forever. That's not good for the economy. That ain't good at all. So, going back to the video.
That interest rates can't be lowered to save the day. In a recession, lowering interest rates works to stimulate borrowing. However, in a deleveraging, lowering interest rates doesn't work because interest rates are already low and soon hit 0%. So the stimulation ends. Interest rates in the United States hit 0% during the deleveraging of the 1930s and again in 2008. The difference between a recession and a deleveraging is that in a deleveraging, borrowers' debt burdens have simply gotten too big and can't be relieved by lowering interest rates. Lenders realize that debts have become too large to ever be fully paid back. Borrowers have lost their ability to repay and their collateral has lost value. They feel crippled by the debt. They don't even want more. Lenders stop lending, borrowers stop borrowing. Think of the economy as being not creditworthy, just like an individual. So what do you do about a deleveraging? The problem is debt burdens are too high and they must come down. There are 4 ways this can happen. 1. People, businesses, and governments cut their spending. 2.
Save
Debts
up,
are
etc.
reduced through defaults and restructurings. 3. Wealth is redistributed from the haves to the have-nots. And finally, 4. The central bank prints new money. These 4 ways have happened in every deleveraging in modern history. Usually, spending is cut first.
But with that, I'll keep it because this video is already too long as is, and this is probably gonna be part 1, and we may have part 2, part 3, part 4, so on and so forth. So you guys can think a little bit how we could maybe improve, or Sega can improve the structure base of this game due to reduce debt. So reducing debt, it's pretty much, maybe I'll save for the next video, but for right now I'll leave it at that for this video. So I'll see you guys next time.